Hi there. So my name is Tiffany Kittlestead, and I'm a speech language pathologist and a person who stutters. Um, and I wanted to make this video today in response to a Facebook post that I posted on an SLP page, and SLPs Uncensored. And so I guess to give some context, the post that I posted was essentially just me kind of expressing frustration with our field of speech language pathology and how oppressive it can be, how ableist specifically it can be in a variety of ways. And I was specifically kind of inviting people into this conversation to to think about the ways in which our field is perpetuating oppressive or ableist constructs. And so I kind of initially started this conversation by expressing my own experiences um, within the field and kind of some of the oppression that I've faced personally as an SLP who stutters. Um, and then inviting people to think about like what are the ways that we as SLPs are kind of perpetuating those things. And so I think the thing that I specifically kind of called out was um, goals that are focused explicitly or exclusively on fluency, or I guess even the ones that are focused on just using techniques, just using fluency techniques to not stutter or to stutter less. And so goals like that especially if those are your only goals, are really harmful because they're they're just kind of ableist. Like I mean that's what it boils down to is is you're operating under the assumption that this person shouldn't stutter and they should do what they can to kind of control or hide their stuttering with techniques. And so um, I wanted to just kind of make a video today because a lot of people on the post were really responsive to like what I was saying and like agreeing with what I was saying. But a ton of people messaged me and commented asking for my goals. And that's amazing. Like, thank you so much for engaging and for trying to do better, to do something different. And I did invite that in my post. I didn't really totally expect that. But to be honest, I was just kind of like feeling very frustrated with just how oppressive our field still is and just how difficult it is to, to exist in the world as a person who stutters, but especially to exist in the world as an SLP who stutters, who is not, who is diverse in this way or really in any way. I mean, our field is um, has got quite a bit of problems when it comes to kind of um, 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 diversity in a variety of ways. And so um, I wanted to make a video to go through that, to answer those questions. Felt that was easier to make a video and explain it rather than kind of just send you my goals. Like, I don't think that's super meaningful because if you see my goals, first of all, they may not be written the way that you need them to be for your setting. I work in private practice, which is, I think in general, like there's just fewer restrictions on how we have to write goals than like you would have to in the schools, and so like I don't know how my specific wording is going to help all that much. You have to kind of do your own um, work within your setting, I think, but just to have an idea of like what are you supposed to target in therapy. I think that's the bigger thing that matters here is I think the first question to ask yourself is why are you targeting fluency? Like why is your goal for the client to go from this percent of fluency to this percent of fluency or to be fluent? Like why is your goal that they can use techniques 100% of the time or 80% of the time or whatever you write? Like what does that achieve? And I think that it's important to like make a distinction here between ages because like little kids who stutter, like early childhood stuttering, might be a little bit different. Like I still think some of the things are helpful to consider, but I think that category of children is just, let's just put that off the table for a second, because I think if we're thinking about people who are going to stutter, people who have chronic stuttering, persistent stuttering, lifelong, beyond the age of like 7, like your goals really need to reflect what's reasonable. Like if you have a 12-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 50-year-old, like if your goal is fluency, then that's not going to happen. Like you can't cure stuttering. And I think that the first thing to acknowledge is that fact. And that's okay. Like if we take the mentality of seeing communication differences as diversity, then like there's no reason to cure something that makes you diverse. That's actually like losing the beauty of diversity. And so like if we really operate with that, kind of assumption in your mind, or like that context in your mind, that like stuttering makes this person diverse in a way that's really meaningful, I think that kind of changes how we think about the client. And so the next question to ask yourself is like, what is achieved through fluency? Like, why am I targeting fluency? Are you targeting fluency because they're not participating? The client is not engaging in life in the way that like they want to, like their stuttering is holding them back from doing the things they want to do. Okay, that happens, right? Like I think it's really important that we assess in a way that gets at what are the ways that stuttering impacts you, because stuttering does have a big impact. Like I'm not saying that we should just not pick up kids who stutter and not work with them. Like just because stuttering is beautiful and diverse and everything, it still is really hard and it does impact your life. And so I just think we need to shift our focus to actually addressing that. And so like if someone's not participating in the things they want to do, they're not engaging in the way they want to engage, they're not communicating when they want to communicate, like let's work on that. But do you need to be fluent in order to talk? Do you need to be fluent in order to engage in situations? Do you need to be fluent in order to communicate when you want to communicate? No. Okay, first of all, like, what is fluency? That's probably another conversation. But like, um, I'm gonna digress on that one because I could probably go into that for a while. But um, like it's not a requirement to be fluent in order to do and say the things you want to do with your life. And so if your concern with your client is that they're not participating or they're not engaging, then work on that. And you can work on that while they stutter. Like someone can engage in a situation and like stutter, and that's progress, that's success, that's a goal. Like that's something that can be a goal of yours, is that they'll engage in 4 to 5 situations they identify as situations they avoid. There you go, there's your goal right there. That's awesome, that's helpful, that improves their quality of life. And that's the goal of our work, is to improve our clients' quality of life. It's not to fix them, because they don't need to be fixed. They're beautiful and diverse in the way that they are, with their stutter, with the different way they communicate. And so, yeah, work with them on doing the things they want to do, saying the things they want to say. And a lot of that doesn't look like techniques. Like if you work on that by giving them strategies that they can like use to not stutter as much, you might be encouraging them to avoid stuttering. Like if you work on engaging a situation that they avoid, and the only way you're working on it is by them going into the situation and using a strategy, then you're kind of sending the message that they need to use that strategy to engage in that situation. And that's just not true. And also, you're not really setting them up for future success, because techniques are really hard. And very few people who stutter actually use techniques all the time. Techniques, when I say techniques, I mean like fluency techniques, like easy onsets or light contacts or even prolongations. Some people like different strategies, but a lot of people don't. Like it's kind of relieving to just be able to talk and and s- and and stutter and like not have to think about it, or change your whole speech pattern just to communicate. Like it's I think that's the next thing, is like if the goal of fluency, working on fluency or techniques, is so that talking is easier or more comfortable, that might be a way to do it. Like, I'm not going to discount techniques in all ways, but for a lot of people, like, that's harder. Like if you have to think about exactly what technique you're going to use and using it all the time, and how you're going to use it on this specific word and this specific letter and whatever, while you're trying to think about what you're actually saying, you're having to think about two things at once, and that's so difficult. And so, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for the idea that techniques make talking easier. They don't always. Sometimes it's just easier to stutter, and we can change how we stutter. There's nothing wrong with like making stuttering easier, but a technique that helps someone stutter, maybe with less tension, or in a way that helps them move forward with their speech, or maybe it's not quite as long, or the block is not so intense on an emotional level. The way you work on that is not it's not always by working on like easy onsets or light contacts or whatever the array of strategies there are. Maybe you can work on moving forward, having forward moving stuttering. Maybe you can work on having easier stuttering, working on reducing tension. Maybe you can work on acknowledging what you're feeling in your body during a moment of a stutter, and reducing your emotional reaction during that moment. Maybe you're doing something like grounding, like a mindfulness technique during a moment of stuttering, so that it's not such an unpleasant experience to stutter. And the okay, there's a lot of different things you can do. Like, I'm kind of getting a rabbit hole here. But the idea is that the techniques that can be helpful for someone might be different than the techniques that you're thinking of. There's so much more we can do with our clients beyond fluency shaping strategies. And so I think just be thinking about what you're trying to achieve from doing that. I have another couple of points of things that you might be trying to work on when you're working on fluency, because these, I think, are really practical ways you can reframe what you're doing in therapy and the goals that you have. If 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 your genuine interest, which I know pretty much everyone, I mean, SLPs are wonderful, kind, helping, empathic people. If your intention is to make talking easier and to make them, more like happy about the way they communicate and more successful in their communication and more comfortable, those are great things to do. Like, that's awesome. And so if your intention is that, then like we can shape that. And so, like, for example, if your intention is to help the client be a more effective communicator, well, first I think you have to identify what that means. Like, and with your client, like, these things that I'm asking should be a conversation you have with your client. Like, why do they want to be fluent? Not just why do you want them to be fluent? Like, what would make their life different if they didn't stutter? um and those are that should be what your goal is working on, like, helping them to achieve that, but like not with the without stuttering part, but like helping to achieve the things they really want. I think that a way to assess that is to ask them what's called the magic pill question. So you ask, like, if you had a magic pill that that you could take that cured your stuttering, that like tomorrow, like you woke up and you didn't stutter, what what would be different about your life? What would you do differently? You know, um, and if they say, like, well, I would go talk to this person in my class that I like, or I would raise my hand in class, or I would go out on that job interview that I really want. I would go into this profession. I would, um, just feel comfortable saying what I want to say when I want to say it. Those You don't have to have fluency to do any of those things. And so, if your client, whatever your client tells you, like, those are your goals right there. Like, those are things that a lot of my clients have told me over the years. Like, those are the things that they would have if they were if they were fluent. And so there you go. There's your goals. Anyway, back to the effective communication thing. I think having a conversation with your client of like, what does it mean to be an effective communicator? That's like a really great activity I really like doing with my clients, because like most of the time what it results in is not like, well, it's not a lot of change. Like it's a lot of like them realizing that actually they're really effective communicators already. So it's just mostly like a reframe perspective of themselves. Because like people who stutter, I mean, I think a lot of times like we have so much negativity from society for how we talk that like you can internalize that and assume that you're really bad at talking when really it's not true. So if you think through like what makes an effective communicator is you're interesting to listen to. People can understand what you're saying, they can follow what you're saying. um you have important things to say that they want to hear. um it's enjoyable to listen to you. Like those are all things that you can do while you stutter. Like you don't have to be fluent to do all those things. Actually, a lot of people who are fluent are not amazing communicators. They're not really effective communicators in all of those ways. And so we all can improve how effectively we communicate. And it really that doesn't have anything to do with stuttering. Um, and so, getting your client to identify like what ways they feel like maybe they do feel like their communication is less effective because they stutter. I actually have had a number of clients I do this activity with, and like it doesn't go the way I expected to, and they do say like, no, if I because I stutter, I actually am harder to understand, and people don't understand what I'm saying and stuff like that. But those are that's also really helpful information, because then you can dig through like why is that. And like maybe it is for a lot of my clients, it's because like they have so much tension when they're stuttering that like it is kind of hard to understand what they're saying when they have a really big stutter. And so like that's something you can work on. It doesn't have to be that the word they're saying is fluent. It can be that like they just stutter more easily, like there's less tension. And then, maybe they can advocate for themselves in that situation. So the person understands that they stutter. So they like have that, no preconceived idea in their mind that like, oh, I have to listen a little bit differently, maybe. There's just different ways you can do it anyway. So, a couple of other things that I think are important to consider is, if you're working on fluency, another thing you might be like wanting to achieve is ease of communication, and comfort with communication, which I've kind of touched on already of like, that doing that doesn't have to be through fluency techniques. But I think it's important to say here that like using fluency techniques is not always easier, is not always more comfortable. Actually, a lot of times it's way harder. And so like if your goal is like for your client to communicate more easily, then like changing their entire speech pattern and like making them use like this like fluency shaping like pattern of speaking is not necessarily going to make that easier for them or more comfortable or more natural sounding. All the things that like we want out of those techniques like may not be achieved. And so, be considerate about that, and also check with your client about how they feel, how natural they sound, how comfortable it is for them, how easy it is to use them. Because more than likely some other technique is probably going to be easier for them. Like maybe a different stuttering modification technique, maybe, a pull out, or you know, forward moving stuttering, voluntary stuttering. Like maybe there's a different technique that is less effortful for them that they can use more effectively. And that makes them feel better about their communication. That's the whole idea. And that's the thing is like, even if I send you my goals for my clients, like they're so individualized. Like everyone's stutter is totally different. It's like a fingerprint, and like how I cope with my stuttering is totally not going to be the same way as someone else. Maybe there are similarities. And sure, there are similarities. That's why we do therapy. We have ideas, we have models, we have, approaches, like, because we know that some things are kind of like patterns, but, like maybe for me, like, I really like to, stutter in a certain way, and that makes me feel good about my communication. Maybe someone else, does really like to use like some techniques, and that's what makes them feel good. Maybe someone else just wants to let their stutter out and not work on modifying it at all. And that's also totally okay. Like I think it's just so important that like every single client you see should be the one guiding therapy for the most part. I mean, obviously you have a lot of knowledge and like but your role is more like a coach or like, a facilitator or something, not like a director, not a teacher. You are going alongside them on their journey as they explore what makes them feel good about their communication and themselves. That's the goal of your job. And, from the age of 7, your client should have a say in what they're doing. I mean, maybe below that, but like my point is that like even little kids like know what makes them feel good. And so, okay, sorry, this video is so long, but there's so much to say here. Um, Another thing I did want to mention is, going back to that question of like, what is the goal of fluency? Maybe your worry is that stuttering makes them different. Stuttering makes them more likely to get bullied and picked on. That's true. We know that. There's research on that. Maybe people treat them differently. They have negative reactions. Like, people are rude. Society doesn't understand stuttering. Society is inherently ableist. Like, that is true. And all of that is real and valid. And I think the most important thing is to like leave space for your client to express those things, to express all of their feelings, not just the good ones, not just make them have good feelings or reframe their feelings to be good ones, because stuttering is frustrating, talking is hard, and there is only so much that we can do as SLPs to change that. Like the reality is that the way you communicate is different, and stuttering is unpleasant. And we can reduce some of that, but like that's the reality. And like people are not always going to be really nice. And so does that mean that we need to make our clients as fluent as possible and change the way that they speak so that no one can hear that they stutter? Definitely not. What is more meaningful is that you can give them more resilience, give them tools to deal with those situations, to advocate for themselves, to ask for what they need, to stand up for themselves when they have those bad reactions, like how to respond, to like embrace all that they are, all the parts of who they are, because even if they don't like their stuttering, it's a part of who they are. It's a part of their identity. And, you can help them to change their relationship to their stutter, change the way they think about themselves and how stuttering can be a part of them. Not all of them. That's another thing you can change is like not just accepting it as a part of you, but also seeing you as all of you. You're not just your stutter. And, I think being able to like expand your clients' like view of themselves and their identity and just like see, them for who they are and the beauty and diversity that they bring to the world. Um, I think that is how you build that resilience, and you help them to, be able to cope with the adversity that they're going to experience. Because no matter what you do in therapy, no matter how many techniques you give them, and how fluent they sound in the therapy room, you're not going to change that they stutter. And so the better thing to do is you can help them to live with that in a really wonderful way. Like, I'm saying it like it's like such a bad thing, but like people who stutter are so cool. Like, I mean, I'm biased, but I mean, our president of the United States stutters, and so do a ton of other people who are super successful in so many different areas of life. Like, stuttering is not just a bad thing. It also it also has a lot of benefits. Like, there's this huge stuttering community that like we get to be a part of if we want to be, because we stutter. And like that's another thing that can really build resilience. There's some research that shows that community and connection can increase resilience. And so the wonderful thing about stuttering is that there is such an active support community, of across the country, at least in the US, and there's some in other countries, but in the US, there's tons of like support groups for like kids and teens and adults who stutter, where they can connect with other people, at both the local level and the national level. Like, I live in Seattle, and I lead a support group for adults who stutter and for another support group for kids and teens who stutter. And, you know, being able to connect with other people and like realize that like you're not alone, like you're not weird, there's nothing wrong with you, like, you know, whatever, all of the feelings that like we all have of like feeling isolated and like lonely and embarrassed and all that stuff can be really reduced when you see that other people have this going through the same thing. And the same with those negative feelings. Like if you have a space where you can share like just how hard stuttering is and how hard communicating is and how frustrating it is when people pick on you and the negative reactions you have, like that actually makes it a lot more bearable. And so like if you can have a support group where you can share that with other people who really get it, that is life changing. But you know, that is so that is something you should do is like connect your clients to support either at the local and or national level, because there's like conventions, like there's the National Stuttering Association, there's Friends, which is an association of young people who stutter, for kids, teens, adults who stutter, SLPs, etc., parents. There's Say, which is like a theater arts group for kids who stutter. You know, there's tons of summer camps for kids who stutter. Like, how cool are all of these things? Like so many kids that I work with, like really like being people who stutter because they get to like go to camp every summer and like, you know, have all these like cool like travels like with the conventions that they go to, like that's so cool. Like kids who don't stutter like don't always get that. So like, you know, I think that's like just one of the many ways that you can start to let your clients see that like stuttering's not all that bad. Like that they're, well, it is hard, like acknowledging that, but there are benefits to it and there's beauty in it. And I think that, you know, connection and community is a huge one of that, because like when you're vulnerable, which we are when we stutter, like when we let ourselves stutter and we let someone see us stutter, it's really vulnerable, which is really scary, which is part of the reason why it's so hard to let yourself stutter. Like so many people try to hide it because like you don't necessarily just want to be vulnerable all the time. Like it doesn't, like it's scary. It doesn't have a lot of like there's just a lot of like hard anxiety, fear, scary feelings attached to it. And so, you know, a lot of people don't want to do that. But the thing is, like, when you're received more positively, like when you connect with someone because of your vulnerability, and when someone like sees you where you are and accepts you, that is the beauty of vulnerability. I think Brené Brown talks about vulnerability a lot, and I just love her work, especially when we think about stuttering, because like the cure to shame is vulnerability, and people who stutter have so much shame for stuttering a lot of times because it's seen very negatively in society, and like a lot of times we shame people as SLPs, you know, or you know, in various different roles, like when we're telling them it's not okay. And so the way that you can work through that is by being vulnerable and showing people your authentic self, and feeling that connection you get from that, that acceptance is so amazing. And so if we can create a space where clients feel like they can share how hard their stuttering is and how they feel about it, and like be vulnerable with us and stutter in front of us, and then we accept them for who they are in that moment, like that's healing. And so like I think part of what I want to like, a message I want to send here is that like you don't have to try so hard to like fix your client, to save your client. By you listening to them, honoring their experience, opening the door for them to share their experience, and you know your willingness to listen, hear them, and accept them unconditionally, that is plenty. It's more than enough. And so, you know, those are just some things to be thinking about. um, I guess my last note I want to say is like, when you are, you know, taking it more functional, when you are writing goals, and you're really not sure what exactly to write, like how do you quantify what I just said? You know, those, there are really great assessments that you can use to help you to make measurable objective goals that work towards these, I don't know, targets or goals, or, these different ways of like addressing stuttering, I guess, that I've been presenting so far. And so I have a couple here I just want to show you guys. If you haven't heard of them, this is the best. I mean, not that I'm biased, but this is my favorite assessment. The Oasis. This is awesome. It's the overall assessment of the speaker's experience of stuttering. And there there are different age groups for this assessment. So this is like the 13 to 17-year-old one for teenagers. But there's, I think it starts at 7, goes to 12, and then there's one for adults as well. And it's just a questionnaire where the client answers like how they like a variety of things to get at like their experience in the world. So like, asking them about their ideas about stuttering, how much they know, their reactions to stuttering, how they communicate throughout their daily life, and how it impacts their quality of life. So these are your goals right here. Like what your client shares during this assessment, or like during these assessments that look at their actual quality of life and the actual impacts of their stuttering on their life. These are the things you need to target in therapy, because this is where the adverse impact is. It's not on how much they stutter or like what percentage of disfluencies they have, like whatever. Like if a client stutters a lot, but they're still able to communicate their message and like they engage in all the ways they want, then like they're not really adversely impacted, or not as much as someone who like maybe you never hear them stutter, but they go through great lengths so that you don't hear them, and they don't ever talk in class or in different situations, and they're not engaging, and they're super afraid of stuttering. Like that is such a greater adverse impact than the former situation. And so you need to be assessing your client holistically, not just listening to their speech. I would say this is more important. If you could only do like a overt severity of stuttering assessment, like the SSI, versus like something like this, where you're actually like assessing like the impact of their stuttering, this is way more. I mean, if you only could pick one in a weird situation like that, this is, I think, way more important, and way more valuable information. And so, this is, an assessment that like maybe not everyone has. I recognize that. And so I have a couple of others that are free that like if you can't get that, which I recommend that one, like it's just so comprehensive and so amazing. But like if you really can't get that assessment, then there are tons of other ones that still get at this, holistic assessment and still help you to see the things that you could target. And so, for example, this one is really good. This is the CAT-R, Communicate Children's Attitudes About Talking Revised. So this is one that's good for kids. And it just, it's a true-false assessment that gets them to, talk about how they feel about their stuttering, how they think about their stuttering, what kind of things they do because of their stuttering, like whether they talk in class, whether they ask their teachers questions, whether their parents like the way they talk or they feel that way, whether they find it easy to talk, whether they worry about their talking, all those things kind of give you a picture of like how they think about it and how it impacts them. So those are other ways that you can write goals. And then another one that's pretty similar to that is the A19. This one's shorter. It's only 19 questions. That one, the CAT-R, is 30. Oh, but I don't have a second page. I think it's like 32 or something. But the A19 is similar. Yes, no questions, asking similar questions. But, and then if you have an adult, I think if you don't have the Oasis, this one is really good. It's the Perceptions of Stuttering Index or Inventory. And it's really comprehensive, but you just go through, and it's broken into like 4 different categories. So there's like struggle, avoidance, expectancy. Oh, actually just those 3. And it assesses how much they struggle with their stuttering, like physically, mentally, emotionally, how much they avoid stuttering in different situations, and how much they expect and anticipate stuttering. And so those are other things that you can kind of like write your goals based off of how much, what situations they don't engage in, the ways that they struggle during a moment of stuttering, that emotional reactivity that they experience. maybe the struggle that they or the amount they expect their stuttering, anticipate it, their anxiety about it, worrying about it, those things. And so those are the things you can target in therapy. Those are your goals. And so I'm sorry I can't just give you like a goal bank, for you to use in therapy. But I felt like this kind of like framework, this framework of therapy w- 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 would would be more beneficial than me just giving you like goals that I have for my clients. But if you really are still struggling with like specific wording, like feel free to reach out to me, and I can send you some of my goals. But I just didn't want to like give you that without kind of explaining the framework. So I think this is way more important. Like what you actually write in your goals is like, whatever. It's just the things you have to do because you have to do it. But the work you actually do in therapy and the ideas that you have about therapy, so much more important. And I think the overarching idea, I'll close with this. This has been a super long video. Um, but the overall idea I think we need to change in our field is that like communication disorders, communication differences are beautiful. And they are di- they are diversity. And, just like other marginalized communities, we can experience hardships. We will experience hardships and adversity. And living in a world that is not like embracing of our diversity, that is ableist, is tough. And having someone to go alongside us and help reduce that struggle of the adversity, not the stuttering, but of the adversity is helpful. But I think that we need to first view it as diversity and honor our client exactly as they are and accept them exactly as they are, which includes their stuttering. So, anyway, thank you all for listening. If anyone has gotten to the point in this video and actually listened the whole time, um, but yeah, also thanks for your engagement on the post. I think this is a good conversation we can start and continue to have. So, anyway, take care.